Good evening and welcome to what was scheduled to be a special meeting of the Ulysses Town Board, but because we do not have a quorum present of town board members, this is in fact simply just a public education session or public information session. And if a third town board member shows up creating a quorum, we will in fact call the meeting to order. But I will not be calling the meeting to order for the very fact that I don't have a meeting to call to order. If you've already come in, there are agendas and packets of the slides for you to take home. This is the same presentation that you are going to be seeing here tonight. If you signed in, which I hope you did, please provide an email address, even if you're doing it on your way out, because tonight, I imagine after you hear the presentation, actually I've got a town board member coming in right now. If you hear the presentation, you might have questions. We're going to want to collect your questions. Some of the questions we may be able to answer. Many of the questions I would anticipate we're not going to be able to answer because it's a complicated process. Welcome. So with Mary being present, I would like to call to order a special meeting of the Ulysses Town Board. It is 6:01 p.m. on May 31st, 2023. Is there an approval of the meeting? Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Can you do a roll call? Ms. Weatherby. Present. Ms. Olson. Present. Ms. Bouchard. Present. We are here. We have an agenda. It was posted on the town's website last week. Are there any alterations to the agenda as presented? Please come on in. There are seats. There's a seat here. There are some seats there. Please sign in. Please leave your email address. It would make our life a lot easier so we can follow up with you. There are motions to approve the agenda. Motion to approve the agenda as presented. For a second. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. We start off with every town board meeting with the privilege of the floor. This will be a much more free-flowing meeting, but if there's anybody who would like to address us on any topic, water or otherwise, you are welcome to 3 minutes. Is there anyone in the room who would like to address us? This isn't your only chance to ask questions or anything like that. If you did want to address us, you're welcome to do it now. Okay. I'm going to throw it to the those online. Is there anybody online who wishes to address the town board for 3 minutes or less?
Can everyone online on Zoom hear us okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Thank you.
Wonderful. So we will move on then to the public information session. And this will be a presentation by MRB Group, and I'll introduce these gentlemen momentarily. I was just giving some context. We are going to, like I said before, Mary was walking in. We may have many questions. Please ask your questions tonight. We have time for questions. If we can answer them now, we're happy to. If we can't, we're going to be collecting all the questions and putting together an answer sheet, an FAQ basically. If you signed in, we will send it to you directly. If you're online and want to email us to make sure you get it directly, that's absolutely fine. We will also post it on the town's website. This presentation is also posted on the town's website under the meeting for those of you who are online or who want to go back, and that will be there after you get home tonight. And we also pass out physical copies of it. So should be lots of ways to get the information. It will be recorded if you want to come in, looking for something fun to do on a Saturday night. You can always come back and watch the meeting you've already been to. It'll be on the town's YouTube channel. So as a little bit of background for this, it predates me. Our previous town supervisor, Nancy Baylor, was the first, I think, in recent years to be talking to residents and owners along Route 96 north of the Jacksonville Water District 3. Who were experiencing water issues and interested in public water. And there were some conversations that were had then. Back in 2016, the town, as working with MRB, there was some engineering plans looked at for a potential water line along Route 96 between the Village Line, Southern Village Line, and Cold Springs, which is where the current Water District 3 terminates. What we had based on requests and interest for different property owners along that stretch, the town board requested MRB to go back to that 2016 plan and kind of overview and update it, because you'll be very surprised to hear that prices have gone up since 2016. And so we wanted to bring to the public the best estimates we could give you. These are not perfect estimates. There are unknowns that happen in terms of construction, as I think probably everybody is aware. But these are the best numbers we have to date on how much a water district will cost. And MRB is going to be handling the engineering side of it. I will do my best to answer questions about process. Legal questions are going to have to be passed to our lawyer, and we'll have to get back to you on it. But we're going to try and give you an overview. I think it's important. I'm originally from California. We do things very differently. We did things very differently in California. They have no water. That's one thing. But in New York, because New York is a home rule law, we have very specific water law that outlines the process for forming a water district. And it's a very formalized process. And the big takeaway is that property owners in a designated area have tremendous control over whether or not a water district is formed. I cannot enforce a water district on you without your permission. So it really has to be generated from the property owners along a particular area who are willing to, quite honestly, pay the cost of participating in that water district. Because water law also stipulates that the taxpayers outside that improvement district don't pay for it, right? Because it's perceived and probably is unfair for users who are not going to benefit from the water district to actually bear the cost of it. So because of that, I just wanted to put that in context. So the route we're looking at, MRB is going to show you 3 different options that cover 3 different sections between the village line and Cold Spring. And there are different price points with each of those. There are different households that would be impacted by each of those. And they're going to give you an overview of that and look at, it may, if it's not possible to do an entire route between Cold Springs and the village line, there may be a potential property owners are interested in doing smaller sections that they will go over. Before I kick it off to MRB, I want to see if the town board had anything else that they wanted to say before we close up. Okay, great. Presentation. Wonderful. Well, now I will kick it over to MRB. Matt and Brian are here. MRB Group is the town's engineering firm, and we're very pleased to have you join us tonight. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, everyone, for having us, and Caitlin, very well put there on your intro statement. So we'll get right into it. For the Route 96 water main extension feasibility study, a little background, as Caitlin indicated, MRB has been assisting the town for, I don't know, close to 10 years now, looking at various engineering reports, water district formation, feasibility studies, extensions. Even more recently, we've helped with Water District 3 in installing a THM removal system with the town. That was a publicly bid project and was implemented successfully. So very familiar with the water system and the area. So coming back, MRB was tasked with evaluating the potential water main extension along Route 96, extension from Trumansburg to Taconic Park Road. Also from Trumansburg Cemetery Road, the fairgrounds, all the way to Cold Springs Road. So making a formal interconnection with Water District 3. And then the third option was looking at extending water along Cold Springs Road, or 96 from Cold Springs Road north to Smart Start Daycare Facility, as that was one of the properties that had brought attention or desire for water in the area. So 3 options were looked at. The study area, option 1, extension from Village of Trumansburg near intersection of Cemetery Road and Route 96 to an interconnection with Water District 3. Option 2, again, from Cemetery Road along Route 96 to Taconic Park Road, and option 3 from Cold Springs Road to Smart Start Daycare Facility. Evaluations looked at the feasibility of extending water. What do we need hydraulically? Can we just go off the water level of the tanks? Do we need to have booster pump stations to provide flow and pressure? Do we have too high of pressure? Do we need pressure reducing stations? We also looked at isolation valves, number of hydrants to make sure that what we're doing can in theory, from a conceptual level, provide fire flow for that area. Also with this, you know, we want to provide a dollar value. We want to know what the total project cost is. So yeah, it makes sense to know what it takes to build the project, install the project, but we also want you as the users to know what your potential costs out of pocket could be. Where the water source come from, you know, whether it could be from Ithaca or Trumansburg, obviously also has some impact because there's some varying rates, varying ways that the rate structures are developed from those water purveyors. And then some other information that kind of, again, falls more so on your end as the end user is the projects would look at providing a water service to, and now I refrain from saying service, but a connection to the highway right of way. From that highway right of way, property owners are required to install the rest of the service from that right of way to your property. So if your property is 50 feet from the road, your water service is going to be a whole lot cheaper than someone that's 1,000 feet. Or 20,000, whatever it may be. However far your property is, it's certainly going to have an impact when you're considering looking at buying into this or paying into this. Generally, there appears to be water desire along Route 96 throughout the entire area that was evaluated. Smart Start Daycare Facility had documented well water quality that was presented to the town and passed along and shared with MRB. Petition was provided, and there was coordination with some of the residents between Cold Springs and the daycare facility of who may be interested in water and at what cost. So I bring up the town of Ulysses zoning map, and I'll point, the quality isn't great on the PowerPoint, but essentially this is our service right here. Along that area, there's a couple development districts. There's also ag districts. There's also some residential districts. Point being, here agricultural districts, if you're looking at developing a map plan and report, agricultural districts would have to be coordinated, ag and markets would need to be coordinated with. Usually, existing structure can be provided water service. Providing an 8-inch main that may serve 300 homes in the future would probably not be approved. Water system cross section. So we have a couple boards over here, one as well. And I would be glad to address any questions after the meeting, but what really this cross section shows us is that up here is the Van Dorn's Corner Road tank. Town of Ithaca provides their water from Cayuga Lake with a raw water intake to Bolton Point Water Supply. They pump their water to, I think it's the Cayuga Medical Center where there's a water storage tank. At that water storage tank, there is what's referred to as the Wolf Lane Booster Pump Station. Wolf Lane Booster Pump Station then conveys water from this elevated storage tank to the Van Dorn's Corner Road storage tank in Water District 3. On the other side of things, this is Hector and Halsey Street, where the village of Trumansburg has their elevated water storage tank that maintains flow and pressure for the village of Trumansburg and its service areas. There are well sources in Taconic Falls State Park, not Cayuga Lake, it's actually groundwater. There's 3 wells. Those 3 wells convey water to storage tanks. One's in the Taconic Falls State Park, right by their main building there. The other one is at Route 89 in Frontenac Road. From there, there's each have booster pump stations that pump water into the village of Trumansburg. Why this is important. So if Trumansburg wanted to provide water to Water District 3 to fill this tank, a booster pump would be required, right? We don't have gravity on our side. Vice versa. If we wanted to flow from Water District 3 to Trumansburg, we have gravity on our side. So that comes into some of the hydraulics that we look at when we're evaluating and trying to develop a cost. Feeding from Trumansburg to Water District 3 requires a pumping station to get the water up there. So that was part of the evaluation and considerations. Once water is here to Water District 3 in the Van Dorn's Corner Road tank, really water and flow and pressure can be provided to a very large extended area. So that's very unique that a tank is positioned so well. Valuation considerations. New York State Comptroller's Office sets a threshold cost every year on what is essentially an affordable cost for water. They also do it for sewer. 2023, the low cost threshold was set at $1,040 per year. That includes your threshold cost for debt service. So that's building the project. The cost for construction is your debt service, the water main, the hydrants, the services, the valves, you name it, the pressure reducing valve stations, the booster pump stations, all those become a debt service, what we refer to as debt service. Operation and maintenance costs. So if you have a pump station, you have to assume the electricity costs. You got to pay for that somehow. That would be an operational cost. Maintenance. What happens when you have a water main break or you need to replace a valve in 20, 30 years? Those are maintenance costs that get included into this $1,040 per year. The other thing that,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you clarify what low cost threshold means? Is that the total amount that they want to see a household spending on water per year?
that is where anything above $1,040, comptroller's office has to approve. So you have to get approval for it. So that is kind of the maximum affordable rate that the comptroller's office agrees to per year. The other thing that's included in that threshold cost is cost of water. What does it cost for you to physically pay for 1,000 gallons of water? Typically 40 to 50,000 gallons of water per year would be a standard 3 to 4 home residential property. Just to give a general understanding of that, and for purposes of this, looking at users costs, we've assumed 50,000 gallons because that is what we most often see. One thing that's not included in this threshold cost is your cost to hook up. So from your right of way to your residence, that's not included. So it's debt service, your O&M, and your cost of water. So then just a little breakdown. So we talked about the supply water. So the options here would be Town of Ithaca via Bolton Point Water Treatment Plant, or Village of Trumansburg being the well supply. Assuming 50,000 gallons per year, Town of Ithaca Water District 3 cost pays $10.05 per 1,000 gallons. 50,000 gallons gives you about $502.50 per year just to buy water. Costs for operations and maintenance, not included in Ithaca's water rate, so that would be set above and beyond that $500. Village of Trumansburg does things with a base charge and a capital charge. So there's a $56 base charge, $56.25 base charge, $23 capital charge, and then on top of that, there's $10.50 per 1,000 gallons. The capital charge and base charge are billed bi-monthly, so you would have 6 of those payments per year. So assuming 50,000 gallons, the base charge and the capital charge billed bi-monthly, you could have the potential to pay $938 per year for water. Another thing to understand also is Town of Ulysses Water District number 3 has a 30-year water service agreement with the Town of Ithaca that's commencing on October 30th, 2003. 30 years takes the water district to 2033. Water District number 3, as we mentioned recently, installed a THM removal system, and it seemed to be providing positive results for that area. This evaluation did not look at water consumption to assess what we sometimes refer to as equivalent dwelling units. So who has the benefit to the water? A car wash that uses 300,000 gallons a year is obviously going to assess more money than a residential one user, 50,000 gallons per year user. So I just, to keep things simple and in the evaluation, that is our proposed approach. So we looked at it more as physical connections. Where was there structures on parcels that could have a water service? Route 96 is obviously a DOT highway, roadway. Working with DOT is cumbersome. DOT has a lot of requirements, specifications, standards that we need to follow, working within the right of way that oftentimes drives up the cost. I mean, it's the nature of the business. And ultimately, when we start looking at these forming districts, density is critical. Without much density, you're spreading significant capital investments over a few properties. So just want to make that known for those here in the room that, you know, density is important. So option one, site plan, Cemetery Road near the fairgrounds, all the way extension to Cold Springs Road. It's about 10,000 linear feet of pipe, looked at 8-inch ductile iron pipe. Ductile iron pipe is a standard of the town that they set in previous years. Couple other things is there's about 570 linear feet for directional drills. We have to get under Taconic Creek, and there's also a culvert crossing near Agard Road. Drilling drives costs up. It also makes construction means and methods more difficult when you're looking at open trenching or excavation along the roadway. It's a whole lot easier to install water main when you're just digging. If you have to start getting drill rigs up, not knowing what the subsurface conditions are, if you're in rock, that also can potentially drive up the cost of those drills. Not to say it's not feasible, it just becomes more expensive when you're looking at the cost per linear foot to install the pipe in those means and methods. As we talked about, we evaluated the interconnection with water being provided from Trumansburg to the Van Dorn's Water District 3. That required a booster pump station, which includes a building. It freezes, right? Water freezes, pipes blow up. You got to provide heat to those buildings. You got to keep your equipment protected. You got pumps, pipes, and valves. We would have to situate the booster pump station where there's sufficient electrical power. That has costs. Pressure reducing valves. If there's ever the potential to flow backwards, or if you wanted to pump water from District 3 to Trumansburg, you'd want to have the system configured so that you would have bi-directional flow of water. If you're going to install it, you should probably have the provisions to make sure that water can move in both directions. Not to say it would or will, but it at least provides the benefit to those users in the future, pending whatever situation may come up. So option one, details, interconnection near fairgrounds to Cold Springs, the directional drills at Taconic Creek and Culvert Crossing at Agard Road. We talked about Trumansburg's source of water supply, its groundwater supply. Difference between surface water with Water District 3, just for the reference of the THMs, usually groundwater typically does not have the volume of organic material that surface water has. So when you have the introduction of chlorine as your disinfection, you create disinfection byproducts without having those levels of organic material. Usually THMs aren't as much of a concern. There's several development districts along this route. There's Development District 9, Development District 3, and Development District 5. So obviously, I don't know if there's, Caitlin, would have to refer to you if there is any development there yet, but that could be the potential if water was installed there, that it may help offset the cost if developments came in.
There's no development happening in those development districts at the moment, so.
Thank you. So financial summary. This is what everyone really wants to hear, cares to hear. $3.5 million. And as Caitlin said, these are very preliminary estimates. We only know what we know from the surface. We only know what we have at our desktop. We don't know what's below the ground. That can obviously greatly impact costs of construction. There is potential 30 water service connections, assuming a 30-year loan with an assumed 3% loan rate. We don't know where interest rates will be in the future. We don't know what interest rates could be provided by any type of funding agency. Debt service is looking at about $5,800 per connection per year. So that's the $3.5 million over 30 years at 3% spread out over 30 connections. As we talked about with the cost of water with Trumansburg, you're looking at $937.50. So that's your 50,000 gallons, which also would assume operation and maintenance. Including that together, the total cost per connection per year is $6,737.50, roughly. Again, this does not include your cost of your water service hookup. Option two. Option two looked at an extension from Cemetery Road to Taconic Park Road. There's the commercial district in that area. It would be roughly 3,550 linear feet. Again, looking at ductile iron pipe water main. Construction means and methods appears generally straightforward. It doesn't seem to be too much obstacles. Open fields, some stormwater culverts to deal with, electrical overhead power seems offset from the side of the road. Smith Woods has, sidewalk on one side of the road, but it appears that the other side of the road, without knowing any other utilities, seems to be feasible to install water main by an open cut, conventional trenching method. Some of the details, looked at the extension from Fairgrounds to Route 96 in Pro Scheme Place. Evaluation does not include extension of water along Pro Scheme Place, but if you look back at our layout or some of the figures, there does appear to be some density along that area. Can that density help get the cost of water down for those individual users? That's where you would have to start looking at how far do you take the evaluation, but our focus here was specifically at Route 96. Terminating the water main extension before Taconic Park Road, eliminated the directional drill, which obviously we talked about increases the water main. So taking that water main beyond Taconic Creek certainly would drive up the cost pretty significantly with not much benefit. This has the potential to serve business zone and parts of residential zone 1 along Route 96. Again, the source of supplies from Trumansburg. And no supplemental pump stations or pressure reducing valves appear required at this time, just based on system hydraulics. So option 2, financial summary, obviously a much shorter length. Don't need the infrastructure associated with a pump station. Total project cost is roughly $750,000, looking at about 10 water service connections. 30-year loan with assumed 3% interest rate. We're looking at $3,775 per connection. If you include the cost of water and the associated O&M charges, total is about $4,712. We've talked about the hookup. And then option 3 is where we've looked at the connection or extension of water from Water District 3 at Cold Springs Road, north along Route 96 to serve beyond Smart Start daycare facility. About 2,400 linear feet. Again, construction means and method seem straightforward from what we can tell from a desktop review. This would serve Development District DD5. Source of supply here would then be Town of Ulysses Water District 3, right? We don't have that connection point with Trumansburg. So there is, so we would be extending and feeding water from District 3. Obviously, the extension and additional consumption would have to be coordinated with the water service agreement that we referenced earlier in the report, but minor detail. This would result in a dead end water main and periodic flushing may be required. So where we have long fingers of water main without any interconnection, water can sit there. So periodic flushing is required to make sure that we're getting good flow of water through the system and that we don't have stale water in there.
We already do that for Cold Springs, because that's essentially a dead end the same way.
How often does that happen? Couple times a year or once every couple of years?
It depends. The operators may find that they have THM concentrations that are in the summer months getting higher and we need to move water through that system, but it's a balancing act. You're paying a lot of money for water, but you're also opening the hydrant and letting it go under the ground. So it's.
Who does the measurements?
We have testing done every month. It's a combination. We are our water operator, our highway superintendent is actually our water supervisor, and he supervises the water operators for the town. And so testing is happening on a monthly basis. In the summer, it becomes more of an issue because, the chlorine will dissipate, in a warmer temperature. So we do things to try and prevent water losses because, we don't like water district through paying for water that's essentially going on the ground. And so, one of the things that helps do that is we do sell bulk water to, when I say bulk water, what I mean is we're selling to, like Willie's Water, purchases water, and we deliberately try to sell, to move water through places that it makes sense to move water through. And so moving it through dead ends means that the water's better for everybody, and Water District 3 ends up, absorbing less loss. But that's built into the structure of the charges associated with Water District 3, because, it's a known factor that has to happen in order to keep the water safe for everybody.
Would there be any issues of having two ends so close, the one on Cold Springs and then this one here?
That's how the system's already kind of configured. There's multiple dead ends, so, it's just probably more sampling locations wanting to monitor. Usually when we can loop water main, we like to loop water main because you just have good hydraulic conditions. Water wants to go where the path of least resistance is, so where we can, we like to loop it. I can take any other question briefly or just keep going.
This question.
Yeah.
Was looping the water main and connecting the two districts, was that reduction in cost factored into the 3.5 million?
So we just looked at not spreading the cost over the entire Water District 3. We looked at that cost being just on those users along the route. As Caitlin mentioned earlier, it's those that have benefit to that project or who's required to pay for those costs.
Would it benefit both districts to connect them? Users?
We can get to that in a little bit. It's a very good question. It's a loaded question. But there could be potential benefits, yes. I don't know if you want to add to that.
I would say that there may be potential benefits. It's not gonna sizably draw down the cost. And the way New York water law treats water district extensions, which option 3 would be effectively a water district extension of Water District 3. It does not treat an extension differently than a brand new independent district. So the real cost of running that line would be almost exclusively borne by the users along that set and that extension, as opposed to property owners in the existing Water District 3 who have been paying water debt for 28 years and are coming up on the termination of their existing water debt. So the costs are probably going to be pretty dang close to what they're estimating, even if there is some additional benefit by being a fully connected system. It doesn't make the cost of drilling any different, unfortunately.
So option 3, there is potential 10 water service connections, back to the same financials, 30-year loan, 3% loan rate. Debt service is about $2,725 per connection per year. Water District 3 pays $165 O&M cost per year. Assuming the cost of water from Ithaca remains the same at 50,000 gallons. The total cost per connection per year is about $3,391.50. So just some general considerations and typical schedule. Option 2 and option 3, from a means and methods and certainly building and implementing the project, are a whole lot more straightforward than option 1. From an engineering standpoint, from a construction standpoint, from a general size and scale of the project, option 2 and option 3 are certainly much more feasible and on a smaller scale generally. Option 1 has a booster pump station. We have a pressure reducing valve station. Hydraulic modeling would likely come into play because we need to understand where we need to set our booster pump station, depending on which way the water is flowing. We also need to understand where we set our pressure reducing valve location so that we don't have too high a pressure or too low a pressure if we're going to look at water going both directions. engineering and construction means methods the most difficult, but to answer your question, could provide a redundant supply connection for the town of Ulysses water districts. S in parentheses. Water is provided from Wolf Lane Road pump station to Van Dorn's Corner Road water storage tank. That now tank with a closed pipe now maintains flow and pressure for everyone else in Water District 3 and ultimately likely 1 and 2. Is that at the Ithaca border? No.
Yes, no,
Or-
one is the north of the village.
Yeah, there's the one down by Ithaca border by the pump station.
Yeah,
4.
Michelle would be able to.
4. Thank you. Option 1 would provide an interconnection between Trumansburg and Ithaca. The benefit of the interconnection could extend to other areas above and beyond the service area of Route 96 corridor. Got a redundancy of supply. That's certainly a benefit. If something were to happen to either one of the mains that fed into that district, you could obviously switch sources. So there's a redundancy benefit that could be there. Cost of water negotiations is a potential benefit. That's tough to wrap your arms around right now and quantify, but certainly when cost of water continues to go up, which we'll touch on later, certainly having the benefit of going between one or the other may, I hate to say it, but could, get to a water war standpoint. I mean, it is common where we're seeing areas where there's desire for water and cost of water can play a significant role when you're looking at the user cost. $500, $900, that's a lot of money that residents are paying when you're looking at the overall costs compared to the state comptroller's threshold. Larger service area has the benefit of spreading any improvements over a larger area, offsetting the cost of individual residents. And then water quality. We don't know what water quality will be in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, what new regulations, contaminants, submerging this and that. Things are forever evolving. So certainly having 2 different sources or supplies could have some bit of benefit there. General time frame for a project. So map planning and report, as Caitlin mentioned earlier, is a required engineering report that needs to be submitted for approval prior to forming a district. There are a lot of procedural steps that need to be taken, including getting comptroller's approval. I would say an aggressive schedule would be about 6 months to get that pulled together. Following that coordination, secure funding agreements could be another 6 to 12 months, depending on grant dollars, funding agency, which program you would be looking at for funding sources. Then looking at for option 2 and option 3 on their own, it's probably about a 3 to 6 months design. By the time you get survey, design the water main, get your permits, work with DOT. It's probably about 3 to 6 month design time frame. Option 1 on the other side, where you have to look at a booster pump station, where you have to look at pressure reducing valves, we have to model electrical service. You're probably looking at a design about 12 months for that project. Option 2 and 3 construction durations, maybe 8 months to 12 months. It may take longer to get the pipe than it is to install the pipe, but again, that's what we're dealing with right now is lead times are still crazy. Option 1, construction duration, again, 12 to 18 months. Harder means and methods, more equipment, more pipe. Generally, more difficult project takes longer time. Next step. So, tonight's informational public presentation, just informing the public on what the potential costs are, so you know what could be expected. Caitlin, I can hand it off if you want to take it from here, but generally gather the public's interest and see if there's, based on varying costs, if there's interest in forming a district. Obviously, as Caitlin mentioned, Supervisor Caitlin mentioned, that's up to you as the residents and the users. The town board's not in the position to enact a district on anyone. Map plan and reports, usually followed by an Article 12 petition to meet the 50% tests, followed by a public informational meeting. What is the 50% test? 50% of the assessed or benefit properties need to say yes. 50% of the property owners need to say yes for a district to be formed. Obviously need state comptroller's approval. It appears that the cost would be above that threshold, $1,040. And then there's a secret state environmental quality review process. A negative declaration that all needs to fall in place for forming a district. Keynotes in conclusion, total project costs or estimates. We know only so much at this point in time. We have recent bid information to understand what the cost of materials are. However, the cost is highly dependent on market conditions and unknown environmental parameters such as bedrock. Bedrock can greatly increase the cost of a project for installing water main. So you got nice tilled dirt, you're going to be able to install a lot more water main than hammering rock and inching your way along. The residents within the potential district will decide if public water is extended to the areas of the town. It's up to you. I think we've hit that a few times now. And then this next item, the cost of public water is generally increased over the years. So I had some information, 2009, 2017, and 2023. 2009, the threshold for the state controllers was $603. 2017 was $966. 2023 was the $1,040. So since 2009, and this is the state setting that threshold, cost of water has gone up 72%. Property owners are required to pay for the installation of their own water service. From the highway right away to their property, you're probably expecting $25 to $30 per foot for, say, a 2-inch service. General note, there's grants out there. Yeah, it's competitive, but a grant that is oftentimes pursued looks at the WIA Water Infrastructure Improvement Act grant can sometimes pay upwards of 60% of the capital cost of a project. So it's just worth noting that from a general standpoint.
Who applies for that grant?
So before we get, so WIA is a challenging one. And so I think it's important for everybody to hear. WIA can be challenging because income threshold is usually a driving cost for WIA. My mother-in-law is a former town supervisor in the town of Albion. She was able to get a WIA grant about 15 years ago. And it paid for about 85% of installation. But it's because the properties being impacted were low income. We haven't done any significant investigations, but preliminary investigations suggest we would have a very difficult time in the people on the start qualifying for income-based funding. Grants frequently are associated with either environmental contamination, which is what would frankly help Jacksonville disintegrate, as well as lower income populations. That's where federal money has been directed to provide clean water. So it doesn't mean it's impossible. It does mean it's a much heavier risk in this particular water route in our particular community. A WIA grant would be something the town would apply for on behalf of a proposed water district. I'm happy to go into what that process looks like, but while we have engineers with us, I think we can open it up to questions for that, because when they leave, I can't answer those questions. So, any questions for Matt Ryan?
I have a question. So we live on Rabbit Run Road. Rabbit Run Road is not included in this particular, we're going to call that option 4.
Okay.
So here's a question. So the person that owns the local restaurant on Main Street on Route 96 has a fire hydrant right in their backyard. So that's probably maybe 200 yards from us. Can you, not you, but we, tap into an existing water line to run back to Rabbit Run Road to cut costs and provide Rabbit Run Road with village water? Like what qualifies that it has to be an entire water district as opposed to 200 yards away from the village water? Because I'm sure that's where Fairgrounds tapped in or somewhere in there to get the water that they just got, right?
So So they were already provided with water. So something that,
Okay, separate from them, just can you tap into an existing,
the short answer is no. And the reason is all water that is tapped into, the village has made it very clear, all new water connections have to fall in a water district, and here's why. There are at least in one area, 50 users currently getting village water on the line that runs from the village out to cars. And they're in what's called a permissive water district, which means that at a point somewhere around 1935, the village ran a distribution line from a well that they were using out that direction to the village to feed water. And New York didn't used to have water laws that were as strict as they are now. And what they did is they did essentially some handshake agreements between property owners who lived along that line. I happen to personally live along a distribution line. I would love to hook up. I live on a Falls Road. There's a distribution line running right past my road, and I have a 12-foot shallow well that we drink out of. So let me tell you, there is everybody understands, no more so than me, that I would love to be on public water. I was part of a water district that failed by one property vote. Okay, so we tried to form a water district. Doesn't mean you guys can't do it. It just means it can be challenging depending. Sorry about that. On the participants in the neighborhood. So permissive water, there are permissive water users who are currently getting village water, who are not a part of the formal water district. However, that is something that is no longer allowed because they hooked up before water law took effect that we're living under down, number one. And number two, New York State Department of Health is requiring that as problems and issues happen along these lines, for serious repairs to happen, formal water districts for them have to be formed. So let me give you a preview of what I'm going to be dealing with and the town board is going to be dealing with that part of the town, which is, hey, you've been using public water perhaps in your property for upwards of 90 years. And if your water line fails, because guess what, it's 90 years old and it will fail eventually. The only way we can provide you clean public drinking water is if we form a water district. So the short answer is, even if water from the village is flowing right past your house, the only way you can access it if you don't live in the village is to be part of a water district. And every extension of an existing district is treated the same way under New York State water law as if you were forming a brand new district. So the short answer, unfortunately, is you can't disconnect without going through the concept. Yes.
I live on Rattleboro as well, and just wondering how do water districts form?
I'm sorry?
How do water districts form?
Absolutely. So New York water law, it stipulates, and it's referenced, was referenced on one of the slides, Article 12. I believe it's chapter 63, Article 12. There's a part 12 and a part 12A. Part 12, I'm sorry, what? It's 62. I'm sorry, I knew it was in the 60s. The first part gives property owners the option to file a formal petition. That formal petition has to be prepared by an attorney. And that attorney works with the town attorney. That attorney is hired by the residents who are interested in forming the water district. That attorney, a municipal attorney, and there are ones who work locally, works with the town attorney to develop a petition that can be brought to the town board. Part of that petition, it's a formal legalized process that's specified very clearly, but you do have to meet percentage thresholds of property owners being willing to sign on in a formal manner, requesting from the town a water district. There's a second process, 12A, allows the town board to kick off the process of forming a water district. Our town board has been discussing and will come back for discussion, and I'm hoping adoption because I think it was received pretty favorably, outlining a policy whereby we recognize it's difficult for property owners to collectively get together and pool their resources to hire an attorney. 12A under water law allows the town board to kick off and initiate a water district. However, as I said before, water districting truly lives in the ownership of the property owners in there. We cannot force you to accept a water district and the cost associated with it, unless a sizable percentage of you are willing to be a part of it. And so what the 12A part stipulates is that We can pick off a water district, but the policy that we have discussed would provide the town board essentially informal assurance from the property owners that, hey, yes, we actually want to be a part of the water district. And so the policy that we're looking at would require 75% of property owners in the proposed district to be interested in pursuing the water district. And what that 75% threshold is based on is because at the end of the process, it can go to, the water district can go to something called, trigger a passive, permissive referendum, which means, and it only takes 5%, not very many, 5% of the overall impacted district. If 5% of owners in the impacted district are opposed to the water district, they can trigger a vote of the individuals in that proposed water district to vote it up or down. So, the town board would want to make sure that before a lot of money, frankly, that would be paid for out of general town coffers until the water district is officially formed. We want to make sure that we're not spending general town money for a water district that ultimately is going to fail. Because it's a two-step formation process. Whether you go the official petition route when you hire your own attorney, or you go the petition route and the town board kicks off the process, the town board will take a vote. And at that moment that we take a vote on the first phase and saying that we have the intent to form a water district, every charge after that, we will be tabulating. So when we are getting our engineering documents together for you, when we're working with DOT and we're paying MRB, we're paying attorneys, we're paying all sorts of people, right? To do all the work necessary to put together, the New York State requires us to do, to put together a water district, we're running a tab for you. And that tab goes towards the second vote. When the second vote happens, that becomes the formal adoption of the water district. And if it survives a permissive referendum, you have a water district. And all those charges that occurred between vote number 1 and number 2, and anything after vote number 2 also, becomes part of the debt package of the water district. Should that permissive referendum succeed and the district collapses, the town as a whole will have absorbed all of those costs. And so we want to be mindful of the town as a whole's resources. And so understandably, I very much appreciate that this seems honestly ridiculous that in the wealthiest country in the world, we all don't have access to clean, safe drinking water. Unfortunately, these are the parameters that we're having to live in. So that's kind of the two-step process to eventually potentially get the water district if the property owners in that proposed district want it. Did I answer your question? Yeah.
I'm also not.
I have some raise you're on Rabbit Run. Excellent. Did you noting on your way out that you just put an RR next to your name? I don't know who you are, but that's really helpful to know. Thank you.
Is there, so you're talking about the process for creating a new water district, and you're saying there isn't a process for like expanding water district?
There is a process for expanding a water district. You have to be able to tap into an existing water district and therefore you become an extension.
Could that become, can we become an extension of, what is it, B?
Option two.
Option 2.
Technically two, right? There's one on Rabbit Run Road and then there's one down by the state park, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
Your road.
Well, there's no, yes, that would, man, I would be very jealous that water right on both sides of my river.
So it's all in numbers, so
That's
we,
part of the permit. So if you're on Rabbit Run, you're near where the permissive service area is of an area that does not have a formal water district currently. So you would have to, that water district would have to be formalized for you to be able to tap into it. Yes, sir.
I'm just wondering if it would be included in this new extended water district, because it provides a weakness in the dead end. This sounds weak.
There's a potential for that. That wasn't part of this in large measure because Rabbit Run residents were not chirping in my ear. Now I'm hearing you chirp in my ear. No, that wasn't a criticism. What I'm saying is that I've had residents from other sections reaching out to me on Route 96 in particular. So I was responding to their concerns.
Months ago, I asked about water from Rabbit Run Road and was told I should go to the village. And I was never told about any process that was being. Yeah, we personally did not know that you were introducing 3 options for a new district in the area, which is, I think, what's prompted everyone on Rabbit Run Road to come like, hey, take us too.
Can I interject? I don't know if you can hear me, the voice from above, but so I would like to revisit the question of, does option 2 provide an option to hook up to Rabbit Run Road? That's a
It
question
sounds
for
like-
the engineers.
So let me be very clear what this is. This is literally, this public information session is literally just providing you with an understanding of how much it costs to start running a water district line. This is trying to give you a sense of the parameters. If these numbers are completely out of your interest, I don't know the town's ability to draw, to make them a lot cheaper. If a water line is in the area, there's certainly nothing that would prohibit Rabbit Run from tapping into it. Currently, in our existing infrastructure, there is no formal water line for you to tap into.
Sure, yeah, so I was just wondering if option 2 could be tapped into from Rabbit Run, or if option 1 is the only one that would provide that connection point.
Closer towards Falls Road. Could you tap on that new main that you're, technically your district that you wanted failed and make that one district that goes to Rabbit Run Road?
So the way it broadly works is, can we do? Certainly, we could run literally water lines all over the town. Can we is the different from, would the property owners along those routes be interested and willing to pay the amount of money? And that's really where the challenge becomes. It's not an ability of can we. If property owners want to line, and for instance, if Rabbit Run came to us tomorrow and said, every single property owner on this line wants public water, what might, but
They're tying into that permissive line.
they wouldn't be able to tie into that permissive line. That's just not even an option right now. We would have to figure out a way to run a line from the village line.
Would want to come from the Falls Road, even below Rabbit Run, that would come up that way, but the most logical thing would be to connect those 2 mains and have a circular route.
And also we have the emergency well comes down South Street, so I mean, you've got whatever system there is, plus the stuff that comes from Woodburn. All tied into a circle which includes Rabbit Run Road.
So I trust me when I say I do what you're here to say about what we consider is the permissive service area. Tapping into that right now is not an option. Why those people who are living there, and the reason it's not, first off, the town doesn't own the line, it's a village owned line. And that line is date to about at least 1935. It will have to be replaced. So it's not a situation of just tapping into that line. That water district, in order for them to get a new water line, is going to involve them having to be willing to form a new water district.
Yeah, okay, so basically, to the young lady that was on the Zoom, that's also on Rabbit Run. So basically, in order for us to get water on Rabbit Run, or at least petition for it, is to do what you recommended, which was everybody sign a petition, then present it to you. It obviously looks like a majority of the road wants it, so we need to make sure that everybody on the road, we meet that 75% threshold, right?
So,
Of people on it, okay, 90, well, I think half the room's here anyway, so.
but it would not be just Rabbit Run, because you have to run the entire line from where you would be connecting the water to Rabbit Run. And the
Right, yeah,
problem-
that's my question is, would we, so assuming, okay, let's just say everyone on Rabbit Run wants it. We say we want to hook in to a connection point on Route 96. Would we need option 1 or would we need option 2 to make that possible? Or would either of them work?
So and I'm happy to delve farther with our attorney who can say it, who can say it, who can probably give us more firm information, but I'll tell you what my understanding is. So if it's option 2, right, that runs from the village line to Gannick Park.
Correct.
So if option 2 of the property owners and option 2 don't want to be a part of the water district, then there's not a district for you to attach to from Rabbit Run. However, the Rabbit Run, we could run the cost estimates of running a line on Rabbit Run, plus you would then be paying also for the connector from the village line all the way to Rabbit Run. Because that's how the village got water along Falls Road. The village paid for that line from Teganic State Park all the way to the village line with no contributions of anybody else living up there. But they bore that entire cost. So yes, is it conceivable for Rabbit Run to get water without the agreement of property owners on Route 96 between Teganic Park and the village line? Yes. But that would mean the burden of paying for that construction would fall to the users who were benefiting, which would be the property owners on Rabbit Run. So it
Sure,
doesn't-
yeah, I'm not suggesting that we do it just for Rabbit Run. I'm looking at, if I'm going to support one of these options, I'm trying to see which one would benefit Rabbit Run. So like, would option 2 be something I want to support for everyone along that corridor, not just Rabbit Run? Or would I need option 1 to support my personal objectives down the future? I'm not saying we do Rabbit Run now. I'm saying, looking at these 3 options, which one builds a foundation upon which we can then form something for Rabbit Run? And if
So-
option 2, it seems like option 3 would be out for me personally. Option 1 is feasible. Option 2, I'm not sure, just because of the directional drilling question at that intersection of the roads. So I'm just wondering if option 2 would provide a potential hookup to then run, like, would Rabbit Run be considered a hookup in the future, like future after this project was completed? Or is that just geographically not possible with option 2?
Option 2 would get the water.
To Teganic
If we got the folks, those 10 users along 96 between the village and Teganic Road to say yes and buy into the extension of the water district, that would get the water to Teganic Road, but then Rabbit Road.
Right, and then
And then
everybody
you
on
guys
Rabbit
are
Run.
doing-
And I personally know there's at least 4 people just down that road that aren't here that voiced their kind of opinion on even making that a possibility. So Rabbit Run kind of disconnects to them and.
Yeah.
Would create a.
Can we hop on
easier
board with the option 2?
Well, I mean, kind of going back to the beginning too, this was a study that was done in 2016,
Right.
based specifically off of like a request from 96 users. So they've been asking us again, so that's why this particular study was reevaluated.
Sure.
So we haven't even looked at any other potential hookups or extensions in any other directions or laterals or anything like that. I don't
That main. run up
I think
Falls
we
Road,
want to hear it.
Sorry, just a second.
I'm just wondering if there's any benefit of costs to having the larger district doing all at once as opposed to having smaller pieces.
Yeah.
It depends. And I mean, I think that's why if you looked at option number 1 is the longest route, and it's also the most expensive route because the engineering necessary to bring water along a section that frankly doesn't have any property owners. It's the most expensive section is the part that's missed when you are doing either option, if you're doing option 2 and option 3. It all boils down to the topography that the engineers would have to look at. For instance, and correct me if I'm wrong, the village actually looked at running water along Teganic Park Boulevard or along Teganic Park instead of down Falls Road. But the bedrock and how close the bedrock is to the surface exponentially would have driven up the cost. So that's why the water line doesn't flow there currently. Falls Road was a far more affordable route distribution. So it's, again, I will say, there's nothing, we put humans on the moon. There's nothing we can't build. I mean, this is a water line, right? The question becomes, what becomes reasonable for property owners and what do property owners want? Yes.
I mean, I guess I'm just gonna be more globally, like, if the permissive line also needs to be there on the for different things to make what it is. I mean, I guess can we rethink the option?
Yes and no. I mean, this is what we were providing, and frankly, and the town taxpayers collectively are providing you with this, and it was, $2,500 just for this, because it's expensive to start doing it. We will be talking, moving forward long-term with Water District 1. Water District 1 constitutes the Cars property and 3 additional users. They're at the very end of the route. Just for information, cars actually pay for their own water line. And they pay for their own water district using state funds because they are a largely state funded institution. So water district one is actually for users way out all over by themselves who are allowed to connect to the village's water line. And that happened in the 80s. So that's now ancient. I'm from the 80s and now, you know what I mean? It happened a really long time ago, essentially in water history. The village is not going to allow additional connections to their line without being part of a water district, because when there are users outside, and for the very simple reason is that if you're a user of village water and you're not part of a water district, they have no way, if you don't pay your water bill, to collect on you. If you don't pay your water bill in Water District 3, which the town oversees, we tack it onto your tax levy, right? We tack it onto your tax bill, we can recoup that money. The village has no way of doing it. And while most people are great about paying their water bill, not everybody is. So the village just has absolutely no interest in investing time, effort, and energy to property outside the village. So you had a question, where you were talking about Teganic Park. Did you want to follow up? Is there anything else you wanted to say about that in that
It
connection?
all can be, I mean, I know there's a lot of bedrock down there, but as far as these guys are concerned, if that other end is kind of a dead end road, you know, there's enough users that I know on that part that would be more open to seeing. I mean, it might cost more money, but if it's even remotely more possible, then that might be a better option to create a route in that direction, you know.
And, you know, we can certainly reach out to property owners along that. I can tell you a lot of people throughout the town reach out to me and want public water. And I get,
It's a group thing.
it becomes though, do you want to pay for public water? And that's really where the challenge becomes. So I'm hoping that,
Nobody wants to pay for it. How did they get the water?
But actually, people need water. And so it isn't necessarily all cost. Everybody understands it'll cost money. The
So-
thing is, eat it.
and again, the town board is sympathetic, like, that's why we are trying to tackle and bring this to the property owners. But at the end of the day, we all live within the framework that New York State has created, and it really has to be your neighbors collectively wanting to join together and pay for the cost, so.
It seems to me, sorry, it's hard to get called on up here. It seems to me that option one would be serving far more than 30 connections if we take into account branching off from that. So that cost could potentially go down if we're considering like every single homeowner on Rabbit Run Road, if we're considering homeowners on Teganic Park.
The difficult situation becomes that now people in Water District 3 are paying capital debt. You know, that's something that they've already paid into District 3 formation, the pump station, the tank. They're being provided water, so now to install this new transmission main or force main that could serve, you know, would be obviously additional capital debt they're not currently paying.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about people outside of District 3, so just all of the roads that branch off from that area that we're talking about, that option one would serve.
Yeah, and it then just comes back to creating a district, you know, and who's willing to pay for that cost of water, and is there density there
Yeah,
that's gonna support an affordable cost that, or a benefit to someone that is in need of quality public water.
yeah, so I'm just proposing that option one could potentially be less money if we canvass to see how many people are interested in extending off of that down streets, I guess. And it seems like there's a huge amount of interest for Rabbit Run. So if we're considering Rabbit Run Road to be one connection of those 30, then that cost could be split further, potentially. Correct me if I'm wrong in that thinking.
It depends on the cost of installation of running water on Rabbit Run also, so that cost will also have to be factored in, and we
Yeah.
don't have.
Yeah, Rabbit Run wasn't included in option one or option two, neither was, you know, Pro Skin Place. I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah, I understand, but it would be a connection point potentially in the future, which is what I'm considering.
Right, but we don't go on connection points in order to look at districts, we look at the paying citizens along the proposed route.
Yeah,
Right
so
now.
we would have to extend
Yeah.
the route from being a linear route to being a, area.
And we would have to get what, 75% threshold in order to adopt.
Right, of 75% of whatever the proposed area of service provision would be, provided that it actually connects to water, right? You can't create a water district all out in the middle of an isolated area. So it has to be able to connect, and you have to include in that service area, you either include all the properties that connect you to that existing line, or you're accepting, like the village accepted with the Falls Road line, that you're just gonna pay for it and nobody else on that route is gonna benefit.
Mhm.
So how do you recommend that we on Rabbit Run proceed moving forward to try to get a water district or part of a water district going forward?
So the town board will be, as I said, and I know this is really complicated, this is not just, I can't answer everything to everybody's satisfaction, I'm positive, tonight. But moving forward, the town at the next town board meeting, which is, I believe, June 13th, we always meet on the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month. We're looking at our water policy, for how we can make it easier for property owners to petition for a water district without having to hire their own attorney. You can go hire your attorney now, and there's a process for doing it, and I'm happy, so, no, exactly. And the idea being that, we'll provide, coming out of that, we'll be able to provide, residents with a form, that they can basically sign on, as a petition to the town requesting it. That request doesn't mean the town board is required to enact a water district. If you want to force us, you can force us to create a water district. And you do that by following the regular section 12 process, by hiring an attorney and doing it. My recommendation would be to talk to your neighbor. And my recommendation would be to talk to your neighbors about the real costs of doing this, because it really boils down to, are they gonna feel comfortable signing on to the potential of paying $3,000 to $5,000 a year potentially in water costs? There's no guarantee, like I said, unfortunately, there's no guarantee of any grants out there to help with rate costs. So we really wanted to provide you with probably what's gonna be the potential higher end, provided that, you don't hit a horrible patch of bedrock and all sorts of other things driving up engineering costs. But the reality is water's not getting any cheaper. Water construction isn't gonna get any cheaper. 5 years from now, it's gonna be exponentially more. So I think it behooves property owners to talk amongst themselves, if you're collectively willing to potentially bear the cost. For Rabbit Run, honestly, I don't know if there's enough willingness among the commercial property owners on Route 96 to sign on to it.
There is.
I'm talking about up.
That was-
Kenny Drugs.
There is.
And if that's in fact true, if that's in fact true, then you can tap in if they're willing to do it. It really does require a sizable percentage. So we're looking at a 75% of property owners being willing for the town board to start investing public resources. Because if the water district fails, again, the regular taxpayers collectively absorb the cost. And we want to provide you with good service, and we want to provide all of our taxpayers.
Sure, you want to be mindful, but at the same time, I think everybody's trying to say, they recognize that it's going to be a sizable amount and people are willing to pay. I mean, so let's go and find out how many people we have, get them on the, sign in something.
The other two districts have only 10 hookups, and you're 10 people right here practically. So it seems to me that the benefit could be pretty high to the community in terms of numbers of hookups.
Right, because isn't it cheaper the more people that use it? Isn't it cheaper?
That's-
Well,
That's the whole
that's the whole
message on
concept, right?
density.
So that's what we're trying to do. Yeah.
Would we need a whole new estimate to expand it from a linear hookup to an area, or would we just have to, could we potentially do that ourselves, considering the cost per linear or cost per foot for extension down each of those roads, or would it have to be a whole new assessment to expand it out?
So the process, so the reason we were able to effectively provide information tonight on Route 96 is because the town had already previously paid for the major engineering work to look at a water line on Route 96 back in 2016. The town has never undertaken looking at water, along a long rabbit run, so we don't even have, so MRB can't.
That's not true. Under Doug Ostick, there was a plan and there was actually a grant to bring the water down. It was very inexpensive. And it got nixed by the town board. So,
What year was that?
I don't know whether it's before any of this stuff, Bill, that you really.
So my guess would be anything more than 10 to 20 years old is probably gonna have to go back for full engineering review anyway.
Yeah.
So
But
when I
saying
say,
there has been an issue.
no, and so I was just, in the recent history of the town, we've not looked at any serious numbers on rabbit runs, so we didn't have anything else to build on. So in order for what would happen if 75% of the property owners along Route 96 to Gigantic Park and Rabbit Run are going to be interested in pursuing a water district after the town board, if it adopts, and again, I'm one of 5 votes. I'm supportive, I wrote the policy, so I'm hopeful that we can create a mechanism to make it easier for individuals or communities within the town to ask for water. At that point, we would have to start investigating the costs associated with it. We don't have even any preliminary numbers. I think tonight should have given you a rough ballpark idea.
Sure, it's back of the envelope.
Do you know what ballpark for Maine, with bedrock or without for install?
You're probably $125, $130 per linear foot, just the water main.
So what would be per mile? It used to be like $1 million a man.
I don't know. There's a lot of things that come into play there. So you're not talking valves, hydrants, you're not
Just
talking
like
like
open big.
probably $130 a foot.
I have a question, and Matt, I'm sorry if you've already, just going back to the concept of the low cost threshold.
Yeah.
How does that apply? Because that's a lot lower than all of the estimates.
So anything above that, you would need to get comptroller's approval for the district, like part of that map plan and report, like you would go through all the processes and then the comptroller would have to sign off on it and say, we followed the correct procedures, the residents and users are willing to pay $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, and then, I haven't gotten to that point, but that is my understanding.
So even if this group and the property owners along the route made the petition, go through the process, and the comptroller saying no.
I believe so. I've never gotten there, but that's certainly a question that I can follow up and correctly answer after the fact.
You know, you get to know like exactly when in the process that gets passed to.
It's in the final steps.
Yeah.
Before district formation.
It would be unreasonable to say no if they do the water quality.
And that,
Those are things
you
to take
you
into
bring up,
consideration.
you bring up a point of cost, right? That's one thing, but then there's also the benefit, right? What is that benefit?
With our water. So, it's not- I mean, we have so much money as that, we can't make it good for kids to drink, you know what I mean? So, kind of why all this began anyways.
Were your preliminary costs that for your estimates on each route, considering or assuming significant bedrock in the area because, it's.
So I was part of the project that developed the water supply sources in Taconic Falls. I know that we hit it at the corner of Taconic Park Road and Falls Road. I think it's County Road 132. Generally coming up through the park, we didn't encounter it, but as Caitlin mentioned, along Taconic Park route, you don't have to look too far into the stream to see it. So we did it, to be honest, because we just don't know how much we could encounter if we, it could add. I don't even want to give a number because I don't know. You can run into bedrock and it can be rippable. You can run into bedrock and you need to hammer it. There's different costs based on how hard that material is. They were able to hammer and rip it out relatively easy, but that was in a short section. If you have to do it for miles and miles and miles, someone in the excavator gets pretty beat up from doing that. So It's a very good question. It's one of the environmental conditions we don't know until we can get out there, and honestly, you know, you would have to go out and do soil probes and understand where it is.
And that would happen in the phase from, the first vote by the town board to the final vote. So when the Falls Road Water District failed, everything was looking really, really good until they got to the final, final total cost. Usually the service area gets presented with the final cost to the very best of the engineers. Like, they've done a lot of research at that point. They've done investigation of that. And at that point, that's when the plug got pulled by one property owner. So, that's just, it certainly doesn't mean that would happen again. I just want to show you my own lived experience prior to my time on the town board.
All right, so would it be beneficial in the next week or the next town meeting for all of us to essentially like combine option 1 with new option 4, which is connecting the village to the town and running down road run and then signing a petition and giving that to you as essentially that what option 4 would be?
You can certainly, there's nothing that prohibits you from gauging interest, in the interim. If the town board adopts, a policy, so did you see that Mary, sorry, did you see Mary just left? Okay. So we're no longer in an official town board meeting. There's nothing to slow you down on gauging interest. If the town board does adopt the policy, we'd be adopting, the formal mechanism by which we would then end up providing you with a form to fill out. So it would require some, again, conversation with your neighbors and them signing on. But that becomes for us, the documents that we would use, to initiate, a water district, because I imagine you can appreciate from our standpoint, the town board doesn't want to impose districts that aren't wanted by the public, and that signing on process demonstrates that there is in fact significant interest, and then it's in the improvement district's, benefit and desire. So, you can certainly, you could canvass as many people as you want. So it's where the lines get drawn truly becomes a question of which property owners are interested in participating. There does need to be some continuity, the geographical continuity. You can't really like hop skip over property owners along a benefited route. But you're certainly welcome and encouraged.
Is there a formal document?
We haven't adopted a policy yet.
Okay, so that's June 13th. So basically, we just have to figure out who's interested, but then June 13th, you all are gonna put something official together.
Well, I'm in favor of it. The board has to choose it. We would love to hear from the public saying you would like us to do that. That's always helpful. We
And
always
then the
love having
initial
participation.
petition for option 3, I just had it jumped and I went
Okay.
to the
Well, then let's
homeowner
just start
area, so we could do the exact same thing, and I don't need to wait for your template.
Okay.
You don't, so to be clear though, we would give you, because we're gonna have things on there that we're going to want to ask. That may not be on your forum, but it doesn't preclude you from talking to your president sooner rather than later.
Is there anything off the top of your head that wasn't on like my initial form that you would want?
Honestly, that's something I would have to get back to you on. It's, we're still finessing that, so. The policy if the policy is adopted, we're gonna develop the form, so the form will not be immediately ready to go. That doesn't preclude you though from even doing a change.org petition with property addresses. I mean, there are many ways that you can demonstrate interest. We're not trying to slow down the process for you, we're in fact trying to expedite it. If you don't want to wait for us, by all means, you can go the original route, and you as property owners have every right to hire an attorney. I'm happy to connect you with our attorney to talk that process, and you can move forward without waiting for us at all. So, yeah.
Very simple form that all that's.
I mean, obviously, we have a large group contingent here on the run. And of the people, so say there are 1 or 2 properties that don't want it, that aren't in the here tonight or whatever. What happens then? Are they forced to pay? Or
Yes.
If
And
it
so-
makes that 75% threshold. If it doesn't.
right, so the
And-
people who aren't signed on, they are forced to pay. So if we have 1 or 2 properties on the road that I don't know what their financial needs are, they still will be forced to pay.
So what happens is a map is drawn of everyone who'd be in the benefited area. And property owners, even if the threshold, the legal thresholds have to, are met. And a significant enough percentage based on New York State water law, choose to participate. Then everybody in that district becomes part of that district. So I can tell you right now, in Water District 3, which is coming up on 30 years in operation, we still have property owners paying in debt, who have been paying in debt for 28 years, who never have hooked up to public water. The debt is still applied to that property owners because they were part of that. So you will be, they chose not to hook up, but they were still levying the debt.
By their house.
Because, and the reason that is because the reality is that their property is frankly more valuable because they have access to public water. So they have a connected benefit, and it's just the way water law works. It's not a town thing, it's a state thing.
One curious question, where does the village come down South Street? Does it come down South Street and turn on Rabbit Run, or does it stop at the corner of Rabbit Run and South Street?
Julia Morehouse, that's good.
So she's on Rabbit Run. She's on Rabbit Run. Actually, you guys are on. Yeah, that's 200, 300 yards down the road. Well,
And you can't, it's not even a Water District 3. Now, Water District 3 is not considered. That's a permissive service area. There's no formal water district. Those are people that the village allowed to hook up at some point between 1935 and about 20 years ago. Yeah, yeah. So they're not
Speaking,
part of the water.
It would make sense though, 96 Rabbit Run back to the village, continue route 4 of 96. No, right.
And that's the water, emergency well, I mean, it's,
Okay,
everybody.
all right. Well, like you said.
Talk to you
let's
neighbors.
get some suggestions.
so it's just another curious question. Is there any interest in that permissive district? The people who, the properties who are in that permissive area, you mentioned that there will need to be a district made at some point. Is there any interest in wrapping that in to, I guess, when is that happening? Is there any plan to make that happen, to form that district?
There's not an active plan to do anything right now. We're going to, frankly, the town was trying to serve the property owners who on Route 96 who had expressed interest and concern. Right
Sure.
now, the people who live in that permissive service area are getting clean drinking water. It has been known by the town. When I became supervisor, it was made clear to me that that's infrastructure that at some point will fail. We have no indication that it's failing right now. The line is not owned by the town of Ulysses, it's owned by the village. So the only way the town would get involved is if, in fact, a new water line was laid there. This is, as you've heard, this is very complicated. This involves a lot of individuals and personalities and engineers and attorneys and all of that. And so we're tackling one area of the town's water at a time. I don't think in terms of all the other things the town is doing, and we have a really great rec program. If you're not signed up for rec, we have an adult rec program that I encourage you to join. We're doing a lot of other things too. So we're kind of focusing on this right now because there were some wonderful squeaky wheels, and that is what happens. And we know right now, to the best of our understanding, that people currently on water districts or in the permissive service area are getting clean water from the village. It doesn't mean it's not a priority for the town. It means that frankly, we prioritize the property owners in the room tonight or online first because of no needs. So we're gonna start wrapping up. Are there any other questions? If you think of other questions, you're always welcome to reach out to me or to the town.
I do just have one question, and I don't mean to go backwards here. In terms of, so I think what I'm hearing is that extensions are sometimes possible, but that the village in general is not in favor of it. Are extensions totally out of the question, or are they sometimes possible? And how do you find out if
Oh,
they're?
it's not that the village would love to sell people outside the village water. Bernhard will tell you that. And the village was supportive of selling water to the Falls Road line and the residents along Falls Road. It wasn't a question of the village not willing to sell water. It was a question of the property owners not willing to pay for the water. And
Sure.
so it's far less about not being able to have extension, it's more about how does that extension work? And the way it works when it's property outside the village, it has to be in the water district by state law. Yes,
So for option 2. Are there any owners here that have come to express their support for adopting option 2, or did you just? I'm just kind of curious because. It doesn't seem like there's that many people who are here that represent like the 10 or the 30 people that would need to adopt. A proposal like this, so.
I heard from some owners along that route, multiple property owners along Route 96 from the village line to Deganic Park. So that was why one option was considered. I've also heard from individuals on the line for the potential option 3. The option 1 was that entire span, and where we haven't heard from anybody is in the gap between option 2 and option 3.
But they're not here tonight. Did you solicit their participation?
Everybody who was on, who would be in the impacted, who had a property, was reached out to by mailing. And then we publicized it in the newsletter. We sent it out to owners that we had email information for. So, and I would say by the number of people in the room tonight and online, the message has been gotten out there, and it's going to be available even if for people who weren't able to attend tonight. And so that's actually a really good wrapping up point. If I would encourage you to have your neighbors watch the YouTube video. It'll be publicly accessible. It should be up there in a day or 2. Carissa posts it. We have lots of other scintillating town board meetings that you may want to catch up on if you're up in the middle of the night. But we very much we're trying. The town board really wants to serve our constituent, and the ball's really in your court.
I really appreciate y'all.
Thank you. Thank you for listening tonight.
Participate.
Yes, sir.
The Cold Springs Road to Fairground,
Yes, sir.
that's all 96.
Mhm.
Are you going under the creek? We're gonna drill under the creek? Okay, what side of the road? The lakeside or the other side?
Could be on the west side.
Yeah, we showed it on the west side.
That'd be on the other side.
You do the natural gas on the west side, so
Pardon?
natural gas is usually on the other.
It
side
is,
sometimes.
that's there, right, that's what I was gonna say. We got a gas line on the lakeside of the road. So the people that are on that side, how do you get water to them? Under the road or?
Yeah, so typically it's short side service being on the short side, right? If your water main's on this side of the road, your house is there, we would refer to that usually as the short side service. Long side would be on the opposite side of the road. You'd still take it to the highway boundary, but you can push a rod underneath the road and pull your pipe through with it. Without open cutting the roadway, right? DOT doesn't like the roads cut open.
You gotta. You know, gas lines.
Yeah. So
So if you're on the lakeside, you could still get water. So we can get you water.
that was part of the evaluation, both sides of the water main. Yes.
And that's a continuous line all the way up to the fairgrounds from. Cold Spring Road.
That's what was proposed, correct?
Yeah. And
For
it just
option
happened on there to the houses across the.
And that's where the evaluation needs to take into consideration pressure, so we're not blowing up pump plumbing in your house. You know, that's all part of the evaluation that we do, and not to say you wouldn't need to knock pressure down at your own house, but
What's a normal pressure for the water from the water lines to the houses? Just start guessing.
Penn State, I mean, design standards typically say like a minimum 30 to 40 pounds of pressure. So that's what we gotta make sure can be.
You gotta have that as a minimum. What
Usually,
do you think is the max? Do you have any idea?
well, if you took the elevation of the tank and your ground level and you divided it by 2.3, you would give a rough estimate of what your pressure is.
So 100, maybe at 50, 60 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, I could probably quickly tell you what, you're 1255, if you're coming from Water District 3. The district service area was about 1100, so you're probably 80 to 100 plus pounds of pressure, so. Where you have to drill under a creek, now your water main becomes deeper, so now you gotta think about what's pressure at the deepest point of that main, so. These are all considerations that we would take into account.
Fairgrounds down into the creek and then back up 96 towards Old Spring Road, there's quite a dip there.
Yeah, and that's where if, depending on which way the water would want to go, you would potentially need to pump up to the tank on Van Dorn's Corner Road.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Matt.
thank you for having us.
Everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Oh, and please sign in if you haven't and give me your